Word. Awesome. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Metagov Seminar. These are weekly research seminars where we invite folks from the greater online governance community space to share about what they're working on, projects that they're building, or research that they're doing that has to do with community self-governance. And my name is Val Elefante. I take she or they pronouns, and I'm Metagov's community lead. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me on the Metagov Slack. And I'm really excited today to welcome my friend Austin Robey. I met Austin, I don't even know what exactly. I definitely read about his projects and his work online in the platform cooperative movement and space. And he's done a bunch of work in research and building uh, towards a future where we can own our online platforms or co-own our online platforms and share in owning the means of production for our creative labor online. And Austin and I have had some great conversations, and I'm just really inspired by his work. So I was really, really excited to hear that he was launching Subvert, and we're going to learn more about the governance design of Subvert today, and a bit about why Austin's doing things the way that he's doing them in Subvert. So yeah, this is about a 20-minute presentation from Austin, and then, or 15, 20 minutes, and then we'll have the rest of the time for Q&A. So please dream up your questions, type them, send them in the chat, and I will create a queue that we'll use to keep yeah, the Q&A nice and facilitated. And so I'll help facilitate that. And it'll be a great seminar. So thank you all for being here, and welcome, Austin.
Thanks, Val. Yeah, my name is Austin Robey. I'm a little bit sick right now, so there's a chance I might sneeze during this presentation. But yeah, I'm happy to be here. I've appreciated Metagov's work, and there's so many cool people in this community. Um, yeah, I'm based in New York. I am a founder of Subvert, which is a collectively owned Bandcamp successor, is how we've framed it. Um, and I don't if you some people know this, some people may not, but Bandcamp is like a pretty integral platform to the independent music community. It's been around for about 16 years at this point. I think many people would consider it a kind of internet utility as like a marketplace for directly selling digital media, digital track downloads, or physical media like albums or merch. And in the past 2 years, it's been sold twice. So whereas once it was investor backed, but seemed to remain independent of investor influence, it has sold twice. Now it was sold to Epic Games, the makers of the video game Fortnite, and then to a music licensing company. And so Subvert is an answer to say, let's create a platform that we all own and control together. And I'll share I don't have a presentation, but we can surf the web together, and I have some stuff pulled up. All right. Let's see. I can share this. Okay, cool. All right, can you see this? Okay, cool. So yeah, I'll just share a bit about my background. Val mentioned um, a, a background in the kind of platform cooperative space, and this was a platform, Ampled, that I helped start with a group of people in 2019 as one of the early-ish cooperative platform experiments as a Patreon-like platform for musicians. So like a way to provide recurring support directly to artists in exchange for special content. Um, and this was a huge learning experience. And we don't have that much time today, but I did give an hour-long postmortem on this project for the platform Cooperativism Consortium at New School, which you could find that online, where I dive into all the lessons learned from this project. And it was that process of doing a postmortem and really taking like a analytical look at why didn't this work the way that we wanted it to? What assumptions would be different? What assumptions are still true? How is the world different today? Like what other models have emerged that have done things in a successful way that this project didn't do as well? And the the answer is led to the approach for Subvert. Um, and one of the key inspirations has been two projects that I've found very interesting. One is Tertulia. Tertulia is an online bookstore that the membership community actually belongs within their own legal entity, a co-op. So Tertulia, traditional venture funded company, but this co-op of their member community owns 10% of the shares. I found that to be interesting, um, especially in addressing some of the challenges that Ampled had, which again, you can go through that presentation, but I would say that the biggest one are challenges that are downstream of funding. So it's a belief that I have that in order to create collectively owned platforms, you need to solve the issue for funding. You can't just uh, ignore it. And so I found the Tertulia example interesting to say, oh, whereas a co-op like Ampold found itself disqualified from many funding sources, taking this hybrid approach that Tertulia took is interesting. And there was also this other project called Upside.coop that took a similar approach. Um, and I was also doing some explorations in the Web3 space. I wrote this article called What Co-ops and DAOs Can Learn from Each Other. And I found, in short, I would say that co-ops excel at creating accountability and lasting trust, whereas crypto networks do not do that, but have shown that there's a tool that ownership in some proxy has been shown to work in some instances as a tool for growth. And so the what I feel like is some of the opportunity is thinking through how can ownership be designed so that it does capture trust, it codifies real accountability, it is firmly rooted in the philosophy of the cooperative movement, but it also can help a network grow and be successful. Um, and and yeah, in this postmortem, looking at where would an intervention like this work, all signs pointed back towards Bandcamp, a platform that had lost trust, wasn't very capital intensive to build, and the network effects are strong, but they're not that deep. So thinking of um, almost like a normie vampire attack like strategy for creating a new collectively owned alternative to an incumbent platform. Um, and so if you see on the screen, there's a book, and I have a copy in front of me, but we started with a zine as like a way to go to market. And I actually have like this old tweet here, which almost a year ago. This idea is a cool way to bootstrap a co-op. Package a business plan as a beautiful zine and sell 1,000 copies, doubling his membership for $100 each. And so we started with a business plan, and that's what this zine is. One of the most reasonable questions when people discover this project is, do these people know what they're talking about? Like it sounds like an idea that people would come up with stoned in a dorm room. And so I think the next question is just, is there a plan? Can this be executed upon? I think that it's a concept that is very hard to argue against in principle. And so having a clear outline and answering all of the questions of like, how would you fund this thing? How would you build this thing? How would it work? How would decisions be made? How is ownership structured? Uh, all of these things have attempted to be answered in this doc, and it's 134 pages. Um, and so when someone purchases one for $100, they become a supporter member of the co-op. Um, and there's also free ways to join the co-op too, if you're an artist or label, someone that wants to sell things through the platform as well. So this has been an interesting kind of way to get past a challenge for co-ops, like or any startup, is this initial kind of bootstrapping hump. So this was launched 4 months ago, and we're now at 4,100 members and have raised $70,000 through zine sales so far. Um, and yeah, it's been interesting as a tool. Like one is it's kind of like a lead magnet. Like people are interested and want to join, especially artists and labels who could claim one for free or choose to pay if they want. Um, but yeah, it's also just like a compelling reason to join. And it's also a kind of brand Bible in a way. Um, and so when folks join, they also get access to a members forum. And so we're having a lot of conversations about policy, about like what is an AI policy for a platform like this look like? Going through a lot of difficult questions with members in the forums. Um, and what would be interesting to talk to and touch on here. I know we don't have too much time. There's obviously a lot of information here. Um, I would say that this plan is kind of broken down into talking about two different things. There's one, the platform itself. What does this platform do? How is it in improvement functionally over existing solutions? And then the model itself. How do you create something that is collectively owned and governed? And so I want to touch on this a bit. I think this will be like a area where we could have open up discussions and questions about. So um, I'll scroll down to the model here. But first, yeah, this is kind of outlined like a vision statement of like what the solution is. A platform not owned by a handful of investors, but by hundreds of thousands, even millions of users. A replicable model for creating collectively owned and controlled enterprises. And three, of an economy where value flows to those who create it, not just those who invest in it. So part of the goal of this model is not just to say, how can we do it, but what is a repeatable model that other industries, other applications can actually take from this? And so this very simple diagram is probably the simplest explanation of this. And we like mapped out how difficult it is to share ownership with users. Like what are the trade-offs with all these different options, whether it's ESOPs, stock options, restricted stock units, profit sharing agreements, tokens on the blockchain, equity crowdfunding, even or just like a co-op on its own. And so our solution, it involves two legal entities. Um, and we have a co-op. So I'm a member of the co-op. There's 4,000 other members of this cooperative. So the co-op collectively owned and controlled by all of us on a one member, one vote basis. We also have a corporate entity. So we have a Delaware Public Benefit Corporation as well. Um, and all of the founding shares of this corporation are owned by the co-op. So what we've done is create this agreement in between, which says any IP that the co-op makes is assigned to the corporation. That corporation holds the brand, the intangible assets, the IP of the code, basically the kind of value capture sits within this corporation. The corporation, which we as the co-op own all of the founding shares of, then licenses it back to the co-op, and also contracts and pays the co-op to build and maintain the platform. So we've created this system that allows for the co-op to raise money through a corporation. And I've described it as like if a solo founder started a startup. Like they would have all the optionality on ways to raise funding, all the flexibility. Um, in this case, the solo founder is a container. It's this co-op that hundreds of thousands of people can become members of. Um, I might pause. Should I pause or just go through, Val? I can pause and take some questions now.
Yeah, folks, if you have questions, feel free to send them in the chat. I don't see any popping up yet, so maybe just continue. I'm sure they're percolating though. So folks, send your questions.
Sure. I'm really bad at looking at the chat while I'm presenting, so if you see one, you can chime in. So connected to this is, yeah, again, one of the lessons I think from Ampled, which is how do you make ownership in the ownership experience something that has clear value to people and is easy to understand? I found myself in sometimes like 30-minute meandering conversations, touching on like very philosophical or economic concepts that are just totally lost if you're having a conversation with someone at a loud show. And I think that the goal is how do you connect or answer the questions like, is this worth anything? Is my ownership worth anything? What percentage do I have? And so we want to make this super clear by rethinking like how patronage works in this co-op. So the concept of patronage is just like a co-op's internal measurement of how much a member engages with the business. It's just like an internal point system, right? So REI, as an example, a consumer co-op that sells outdoor goods, like a retail co-op, they measure patronage by how much money you spend in the store every year. And based on that, your proportion of how much money you've spent based on other members can be how a dividend is calculated and distributed. So what we're doing is expanding this concept of patronage to think about a lot more of the actions that build and create value in online context. So how much is an artist selling on a platform? How much is someone buying through the platform? Um, are people active in governance conversations? Are people referring other people to the platform with a unique link? And so what we're doing is taking all that, um, those actions and rewarding them with a unit of patronage. This is the first pressing of the zine. So we updated this. We're calling them ownership units. So the idea is every quarter then we will retroactively distribute ownership points to members of the co-op. And what that represents in our case is a proportional claim to all of the co-op's assets in a liquidity event. And the co-op's assets include all of the founding shares of the platform. So what we've done is create like a direct proxy for a user of a platform taking actions on a platform and then gaining more ownership of the platform itself. Um, and coinciding with this, we are also every quarter planning to get a new third-party valuation of the corporation. And so what we can do is back of the napkin math to say in like an integrated ownership dashboard that a user has, how much nominally their ownership points are worth. So this I think is like a going to be a fundamentally new kind of platform experience to build a kind of ownership experience within the platform itself. Um, and uh, yeah, this is something that I feel excited about, like having ownership actually be part of the experience of using the platform. And I want to go down to what I think is the most interesting part of this. Um,
Austin, we did have one question if you want to pause for a question.
yeah, go ahead. What I can't see it because I don't have the chat in front of me.
I got you. So, Ronan, would you like to unmute and give voice to your question?
Sure. Yeah, it was related to the diagram you showed earlier about the co-op and the PBC, and I was wondering why you chose to make the development part of the co-op as opposed to the PBC, because I would imagine that creates like classes in the co-op and maybe introduces complexity. There's like builders and there's artists.
Yeah, I think it just depends on what we would. Yeah, the question, I think it's like the co-op or the corporation, you could choose where certain things sit. And for us, the co-op is the center of the organization. Like the co-op is the hero. That's what hires people. That's where like people work. Um, the corporation is more of a holding company. Like it's not paying pe it's not actually doing operations. And yeah, so there are other ways to structure something like this for sure. Um, for us, it makes more sense for the co-op to be the center of everything and to think of the corporation really more as a tool for the co-op to fundraise is like how we're thinking about it. Does that help answer the question?
Yeah, definitely. That's really helpful. Thanks. Very
Cool.
cool.
Um, and yeah, so here's what gets me excited. Like one, yes, creating, there's $250 million of activity that goes through Bandcamp every year. And it would be great to create a collectively owned and controlled alternative. Like that is already ambitious enough, but the we're trying to outline a much larger possibility here, um, which is a model that we're calling the Mondragon of music. So Mondragon, the largest co-op in the world in the Basque region of Spain, started as a home appliance manufacturing company in 1956. And today they have their own bank, their own university, their own chain of grocery stores, their own construction company. The list goes on of these seemingly unconnected business ventures, but they're all connected because they're all they're all services that the community needs. And so that's why it makes sense to fit under this community-owned umbrella. And so what we have said is like what is possible, what's made possible by the success of the platform. The more successful the platform becomes, the larger our co-op grows. And our co-op owns the platform, like a corporation as the platform. Um, and in between it is kind of like a legal and organizational protocol for distributing ownership back to co-op members and a protocol and ways to raise funding. Um, what we are imagining, and we've outlined this in Zine, is like a 50-year roadmap. What is possible when we have a self-governing legal entity that has 1 million independent music participants around the world? We already have members from 65 countries. So what's possible to me is that this is where a Mondragon of music model could take shape, which is to say, Mondragon allows new enterprises to tap into this network, and Subvert could do the same thing, just based on what members need. So just as Subvert Co-op and the co-op members own a platform, there's no reason why we couldn't own a venue or a network of venues. Uh, uh, like professional services, a tool like record pressing services, or even access to like our own bank. And like this to me is where the model gets to be the most exciting, is thinking about the platform as step one, as building the social and economic engine that helps organize this and grow this co-op, like a kind of a synapse for the organization. But then that being the foundation for not just like a new Bandcamp, but for an entirely new alternative, collectively owned economy for this community. That's the bigger goal. Um, and it's my opinion that this is not even that far-fetched. I feel like this is more realistic than 95% of startup pitch decks that you'd see because this already exists. It's not fiction. There's no reason why we couldn't repeat this. Um, so
Austin, we have some questions if you're at a good pause point.
yes, yes.
Cool. Um, Rosa, do you want to ask your question that expanded off of Ronan's question?
Yeah, sure. Just the piece in Ronan's question that I didn't hear much of an answer to and would love an exploration of is how you're managing like multi-stakeholder governance, because you've got the people who work for the co-op and help build it, you've got the artists, you've got consumers and supporters. There's governance questions to that, and I'm just curious how you're thinking about those.
That's a great question because I'm speaking to Metagov and I skipped over the governance section. So that's
This
good
is
to
what we're
talk
here
about.
for.
So we have one I'd say like the kind of centerpiece for the governance of the platform is an elected board. So we have four classes within the co-op: workers, artists, labels, and supporters. Right. So if you look at website, we have 3,000 artists, 500, about 500 labels, and 500 supporters. So what we're planning to do starting as early as the spring is have our first board election, which would be like a representative democracy of these groups. And so that board is in charge for holding leadership accountable, can fire me, hire someone new if I'm, not upholding my responsibilities to the community. And so that's I think like the centerpiece is thinking about this like a representative democracy. We also have like a lot written here about our kind of philosophy on governance, like dispelling a lot of myths, like no, it's not everyone votes on everything. What this really means, just like um, very clear and transparent decision-making processes. So there will be delegated decisions, but I think the most important thing are clear, accountable feedback mechanisms. And um, we also just want to make sure we build good software. Like, so we've outlined like what are decisions that are operational decisions, right? What are decisions that are more strategic that the board would make, and what are fundamental decisions that like all co-op members would need to be a part of. So at a basic level, that just includes electing the board, amending the bylaws, and dissolving the co-op. That's like what every member would vote on. Um, and then day-to-day stuff, functioning more like a traditional company, right? And then we have these benchmark community or like member events that we're planning, like a quarterly town hall, annual general meeting, And then every step along the way, we're just practicing transparency. Like I try to think of it like if you were a co-owner of a bakery and you didn't have access to the profit and loss statements or didn't have a way to reach the manager or had no say in the business, that wouldn't really make me feel like a co-owner. So on the website now, you can see we've published all of the startup costs, like in an itemized way. Like what's all the things that we have personally paid for to get this off the ground. And then the first 3 months, we also have a like a transparent profit and loss statement as well. I did I answer the questions about, or I'm curious if there's anything else on the governance front.
Rosa, did you
Yeah,
have a
I think that answered my question pretty well. Obviously more details to dive into, but board structure reminds me of Stocksy a lot. And yeah, I'm glad with the way you have it laid out. I think next in stack is
Torsten?
Torsten. Yeah.
Torsten, then Steve, then Rick. Oh, Torsten, sorry, yes, you don't have mic on, so I got you. How does Subvert envision to support/attract online music collectives? For example, Naviar Haiku or Disquiet Junto, who already co-create in weekly jams or publish on music platforms like SoundCloud, Bandcamp, etc.
Well, I mean, we have this section too, just on actually executing, and marketing is a big part of that. Kind of see the network to me as a key um, driver of visibility. Um, but yeah, it's a how do we reach people? It's a combination of direct outreach. It's a combination of like our presence online. It's also a combination of leveraging the network in a kind of logic of um, referrals or affiliates too. And so, or if you're a member, connect us with them too. But I mean, we've been around for 4 months and yeah, up to 4,000 members. So I think we are reaching people. It's not going to happen all at once, but yeah, it's super important. It's not like a second thought for us on how to reach people. There's going to like sustained direct, warm, cold outreach. Like we've been experimenting with paid media as well. Like we I think off to a good start, but yeah, this um it's not going to be left up to like hope or magical thinking. We like really have to reach everybody. So there's going to be many ways. It's not, I
Yeah,
hope that answers the question.
yeah. And also there was a comment in the chat about like influencers and getting artists on board who uh are already like, yeah, have the disposition towards like co-ops and collectives. And I think that's like a very obvious uh marketing strategy.
Yeah, and I think
Um,
it's we want to reach people that like aren't as politically minded too. Like
mhm.
it should feel obvious. It shouldn't be for the already converted. I think it should be a great entrance point for people to like maybe think about shared ownership for the first time. And I also think
Mhm.
that marketing is downstream again of solving this question of funding because it's expensive. Like it takes money and time to build like the right marketing assets and campaigns and strategies. And so um, outlined in our V1 budget is like a very, very healthy marketing um, budget in there too.
Cool. Steve, your turn. Talk more about investor exits. Will the co-op buy back
All
shares?
right,
Do you
right.
want to?
I can take it from here.
All
All right,
right,
so
go for it,
putting
Steve.
aside the fact that I don't think platforms like this will exist in 10 years, because you'll just go to like my digital twin if you want to listen to my song, and it just will try and hawk it to you, and then you can ask my twin like, "Hey, what other artists do you like?" And so you can talk to the artists in digital form, and it's going to be, I think, more compelling. But um, the
I
actual
disagree.
structure you're talking about, I like tremendously. And in fact, we're trying to do a little bit at this organization that I work with, the nonprofit Quai, which is basically an AI co-op. And sort of the things that come out of that co-op are going to then go to a venture studio, which is going to launch individual ventures. So instead of being paired with just one corporation, there's a sort of agreement to have various corporations spin off out of this one venture studio. So, but more specifically, I wanted to ask you, how do you see exits for investors? Like, do they buy back shares? Does the co-op buy back shares, or are there other exits?
Uh, Firstly, totally disagree with the sad vision that you outlined for music. I there is a large passive group that maybe wouldn't care if things are lo-fi chill in the background. But when you look specifically at the existing community of power users that are on Bandcamp, like it is part of their identity, relationships directly with artists is incredibly important. People pay more than the asking price more than half the time. Um, it's another reason why I feel like this is the right kind of intervention place to make an intervention is um, because it may be smaller than the number of people that passively listen to songs on Spotify, but there's a niche community that like is deeply it's deeply part of their identity to support artists directly.
Sorry if I gave you the impression that my solution would not include things like that. I was trying to put it aside but I was kind of be trying to be funny, but it
Okay.
failed, obviously.
There is like a pretty lively, active conversation on the role of AI, which is yeah, it's a polarizing and emotional topic for people. Most of the people in the Subvert community are like bringing nuanced opinions, but um, see it as like a threat. Um, so I'll go to the exit question. We've outlined here what we have called a prism of possibilities. Like, yeah, you've nailed kind of what is one of the tougher things to solve when you solve for funding. Like, how do you achieve this sufficient amount of necessary funding to build something like this? And also do it in a way that can have safeguards and allow it to maintain its integrity and cooperative governance. Super hard to do. Um, our model of these two legal entities is part of what our strategy for enabling this. So the way that that works is the co-op itself is what governs the platform. That happens irrespective of any investment made in our corporation. What investments in that corporation would mean is that the co-op's stake in that corporation would get diluted slightly for issuing new shares. What we've instituted already is in investment terms, which we haven't raised this funding yet, um, outlines a dual class structure in the corporation where the co-op has 10 times voting rights. So we've basically taken the God shares approach that Mark Zuckerberg has at Meta, but take that for us. So that is a safeguard for the co-op ever losing control of the corporation. When it comes to answering this question about exit, one, if you need, like, we see it as necessary to raise sufficient funding. And so therefore we need to also answer to investor um, interest or at least empathize with them. And I think for an investor, it doesn't mean that we would have to create a single determinative outcome for the company for an exit, but that pathway would have to at least exist in order for it to make sense for them to invest. So the way that we've looked at it is to say, look, this is an emergent system. And what we want to do is say, if there's a path for artists capturing the value they create, we leave that pathway open. And in between here and any future outcome is a layer of artist and member control. And so it's not up for me to say what is the outcome of Subvert. That's for members to decide. And so we've outlined what could this look like. I think the most likely ones would be like we are self-sustaining and profitable, and that issues dividends to the co-op buys out the investors and returns ownership back to the co-op. Or if artists have captured enough value where there's several artists with 5, potentially 6 figures worth of ownership, I think that there's a chance that artists may also want to explore partial exit strategies while keeping the integrity of cooperative governance of the platform. I would say that traditional exit scenarios are less likely here, but I think there's more creative ways to potentially capture value. But again, it's not up to me. It's up to members. I don't really believe in like a paternalistic approach of saying like, here's what's good for you, here's what's not. And I like this one at the end, which is like we also acquire Bandcamp. We could also consider steward ownership in some way or exit to a nonprofit. Like, what does it look like when I mean, a scenario where it just becomes a commons and utility rather than something that is housed in a corporate entity. Like, I think there's a lot of different potential outcomes. And yeah, for an investor, it's like a different risk reward profile. It's like seeing that, hey, something like this has a much greater chance of being a 1 rather than a 0, you know? And so yeah, that's how I think an investor would think about it. But it also would require a unique kind of investor that would be willing to make some real concessions, especially when it comes to governance. Is
Cool.
that
Yeah.
answer?
Yeah. Um, I mean, that actually brings me maybe to Krishna's question first, which has to do with what kinds of investors do you want to give voice to your question?
Uh, yeah, you actually answered um, part of the question. So I don't know if you can talk about what kind of investors you're looking to encourage or maybe discourage, and then like a dollar amount ish that you're looking forward to launch.
Yeah, so we published like our outlook on fundraising, and part of this is what we outlined in terms of the profile of what funding a funder could look like is what we've outlined as this funding waterfall. So kind of going in order of what are the most advantageous or preferable sources of funding to the least preferable. So one, grants. I think that like there's not that wide of a net to go searching for these, but I think that we may fit the thesis for some kind of philanthropic giving in the arts, and so we're looking at that. Revenue. I think like we've made very intentional choices to prioritize and expand sources of revenue. So like we've also been offering platform fee vouchers for artists and labels to like pre-purchase future platform fees at a discount to offset them. So we've raised I think like $7,000 through that so far. And then members as individuals. And I think like down to funds. Like I think that's its own bucket, which has many different layers within it. And so in my mind, it's like it's a unique coalition of people, ideally driven by members. I think, yeah, members, revenue, and grants. Can we do it with just those together? I feel like we're raising $350,000 right now, and I think it's possible.
Awesome. Rick, you're next. Sorry I skipped you in Stack. Sometimes it gets confusing with the raise hand feature in the chat, but question for you.
Oh, thank you, Mel. I'm sorry, I arrived a little bit late to the party, but I did come in where you said you weren't talking much about the governance. And one of the things about governance is how is it created and to what extent are people oriented, newbies coming in oriented to the spirit of the governance? And the other dimension to that is the governance will be different, I suspect, between if it's a purely nonprofit commons type of environment versus a corporate one. And the business models will be different. So I'm just curious to maybe to expand a little bit more about your current thinking of governance, number one, and two, how to get people to have fidelity to the governance. And I'll add on to it, how does the governance evolve over time? Because you'll learn and you'll tweak the governance as you go along.
If I understand the question correctly, I think the outlook is to say members can meet us where they are at. We don't have regular synchronous calls or meetings. We're members in nearly every time zone in the globe. And so we are focusing on a culture of writing in the forums to discuss issues. People should be able to use the platform without ever engaging in governance. I think it's really for people that are interested in that. So don't want to create burdens for people to have to engage. And I think for us, it's how can we make as much information available so that people can stay updated and provide input. And so in the designs for a member's ownership dashboard, there's an open text field, which allows any member to give any feedback at any time, which goes to the team, can be anonymous, or just go to their board representative too, like if they have complaints about the team or the organization. And so, yeah, really just trying to make it a seamless experience. Like, how can a member feel like at any time they can voice an opinion? And how can we synthesize the sentiment of all members and have that inform what we're doing? So an example of what we're doing now, I mean, I feel like this is what we're talking about is not even codified at a co-op level. This is really just like culturally how inclusive and participatory is this as an experience to be a part of. What we have been doing is regular platform previews for members. So we've been publishing prototypes, screens, designs, and allowing members to give feedback on those. And that's actually been kind of like a superpower. Getting such high fidelity feedback so regularly and so early has been really, really helpful in shaping the product. So I'd say it's like a multifaceted approach. Some of it's like at a deeper legal level, and other part of it is just creating a culture of participation so that anyone feels like they can give input at any time. So does that help answer the question of how we're thinking about it?
Yeah. Well, let me just give you a different angle to this. Say I'm a newbie and I'm saying, oh, this looks interesting. I wonder what this community is about. If I don't have an attractor for why I should even get involved, then it's difficult. So if I'm just speculating here, so suppose you had a one-page document that summarized what the first principles, the spirit, the culture, the norms, the simple rules. And I could go to that and I could say, oh, this sounds cool. I like this whether it's informed by sociocracy or whatever it is. Because in joining a culture, I want to vet what I'm getting into. And I've certainly been into communities where they've been very loose about it. And what's happened is you attract people and it gets very bumpy. There are, people who, perhaps don't abide by a certain degree of etiquette that you would consider to be normal. And then, conflicts can arrive, which is good, but if they're not managed well, they can be problematic.
Well, new members are oriented by this zine that we're looking at now, and being able to get a physical copy, and then landing in our members only forum, which is very, very active, and luckily has a very healthy culture right now. So
well, what I'm saying is if just reading something or videos, it's about making an attractor. It's sort of
that's the zine. That's the zine.
Yeah.
I think this plan is that, and it honestly can't be. If it were one page, people would ask follow-up questions, and then they would want to read the zine. It's a dense document for a reason, because it covers so much ground, and I think people may be interested in some chapters over another, but yeah, it's kind of like a member's orientation in a way. I mean, at least how we're thinking about it. Is it perfect? Maybe not, but so far I've seen evidence that it is working as a orientation method. People have posted questions in the forum, and other people are answering on behalf of the organization based on things that are ideas that are in the zine. And so for me, I've seen it as being pretty helpful. At least I understand what you mean, and I feel
I'm talking about CQI and having breadcrumbs so that you can, if you want to grow, I presume, and it takes a certain person who will come and read all this and say, yeah, that's for me. It's just a question of have a variety of strategies so you can recruit more people. That's all.
Right.
Yeah.
Hey, folks, we can continue this discussion for sure in the Slack. So I've already actually started up a thread for us in Slack to continue. And Ronan, we didn't get to your second question, which is a really good one. So Rick, if there's any follow-up that you have for Austin, check out that in the Metagov Seminar channel, the thread. And let's close out here. And
can I give
Patty,
a shout or like an ask for folks?
Yeah.
Okay. One, if folks are interested, I'd say DM me on Slack. I would love to have people from this community help give a second look at some of the early ideas of specifically the corporation's governance structure. I know there's some governance nerds here that like really love your eyes and ears. And then also would love to invite anyone here to become a member of Subvert too. So when you join, you can get like a physical copy of the book, and it's subvert.fm. So just wanted to give that a shout and invite everyone here to join.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Austin. And in Metagov tradition, we'll have folks, if you're still here, please unmute and give Austin a round of applause. Thank you for coming and sharing your work with us today.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you.
Righteous.
Have a great day, everyone.